what SSRIs do is they inhibit our serotonin receptors. Psilocybin works with serotonin, so we're getting a natural serotonin boost. So people are feeling their baseline is being raised. They're able to feel more happier and be more connected and more present with working with microdosing. And also, we're not doing it every single day because of the tolerance buildup. With SSRIs, you are dependent on that every single day. You have to take the pretty much, and if you stop, there could be consequences. So anyone that's on it, they have to wean off of it with their pharmaceutical provider. So I just feel like working with the microdosing allows people to have more control, more agency, more space within themselves, as opposed to numbing it up.
In this episode of ayahuascapodcast.com, I talked to Adrian Lozano. We talk about his work with mushrooms, both microdosing and macrodosing. We talk about his story of overcoming social anxiety with ayahuasca and other psychedelics. We talk about use of SSRIs versus microdosing mushrooms and inner child work. Enjoy this episode. And welcome to ayahuascapodcast.com. As always, with you, the host, Sam Believ. Today, we're interviewing Adrian Lozano. Adrian hosts transformative retreats. He facilitates ceremonies and supports individuals with microdosing and integration. He's a plant medicine facilitator and microdosing coach. In his work, he incorporates modalities such as parts work, breath work, meditation, and somatic awareness. Adrian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sam, for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
Adrian, before we begin, tell us a little bit about yourself and what in your life brought you to work with psychedelics.
Yeah, so both my parents are from Mexico, so I was born and raised in Southern California. And, growing up with parents that are very strict Catholics, I had a lot of, I grew up with a lot of suppression, shame, guilt, and that led into, having anxiety, depression. And then as an adult, as a young adult, I would also drink alcohol to cope with all of that. So before I came to plant medicine, I was really struggling with my mental health. I felt really lost and disconnected. So it's actually ayahuasca. One of my friends invited me to a ceremony with ayahuasca, and that was like my first dive into all of this. But it was kind of a lot to come into. It's like I didn't have any foundation support, any kind of grounding. So then, working a lot with Aya, but then kind of have worked with other modalities and therapy and done a lot of integrating. That's kind of where I realized that there was a lot of generational trauma that I had that I wasn't aware of. And through my own process of healing, you realize that these medicines really have a big capacity to heal, to transform, to wake up our inner strengths, and have decided to commit my path to being of service to others.
Thank you for sharing your story, Adrian. I realized that you say, you want to do ayahuasca, and obviously it changed your life, but it was a difficult experience. And I believe maybe from what I'm hearing, did the retreat you went to, what kind of ceremony was it? Was it just a one standalone ceremony, no support, or was there some kind of container with group therapy, or maybe did they provide you any integration support and stuff like that?
Good question. So actually, it was a community from Colombia that came down. It was like it was a big ceremony. It was a retreat. It was here in the United States, about 40 people. But no, that's exactly why I think it was so hard for me, because I had 2 ceremonies. I felt all this connection, interconnectedness, and then because no one was from here, everyone left, and all people that were there were from all over the United States. So I had no community support at all, and the weed started to grow back really fast. And actually, after my first ceremony, I feel like things got worse before they got better. But a big part of that was because I didn't have any support, no community. But, they were coming from Colombia, and then they left. And then that was it.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking that is because I've never had ayahuasca outside of Colombia. My plant medicine experience started here, and I was going to those more sort of, let's say, traditional indigenous style ceremonies where you kind of you come over, you bring your own mattress, bring your own bucket, and you find a spot, and then you go get your medicine. They support you in the ceremony, and after that, you're on your own. And I had a couple experiences that were also pretty traumatic. I mean, they were all meaningful, but so I just felt like once I was drinking in the jungle, and I went to the bathroom, and my journey started very deep in the bathroom, and I locked myself in the bathroom, and they just left me there. So by the time I came back from this extremely deep experience, I was on my own in the bathroom. There was nobody in the house, and I was like, yeah, it was terrible. So that kind of, I brought it back to the work with at my own retreat, where we focused so much on, number one, like when people arrive, first 24 hours, there is no medicine. It's just talking, just getting to know each other, teaching them how to navigate their experience, how to ground themselves, and then building trust within the group, building trust with the facilitators so that they can actually, when the time comes and ayahuasca tries to dissolve your ego, you can actually let go. So, but afterwards, do I understand correctly that for now you're still a big fan of ayahuasca and you use it for your own self-work still?
Yeah. I've done most of my healing with ayahuasca, and I've done a lot of like my shadow work with it as well. Like you said, like the trauma and like ego, letting go of all that. But I still do sit with her from time to time. But I work with mushrooms, like in my own practice and what I do. But yeah, I have a deep connection with ayahuasca.
It's interesting because when in our work with ayahuasca, I only work with the shaman. Like I would never, even though I've been working with it for years now, I would never even consider serving it. However, I did serve mushrooms in couple ceremonies back in the day, a long time ago. Like, what do you think? Why do you think the barrier of entry is lower with mushrooms? The medicine is as strong, but what is it about it that makes it, let's say, more approachable from a facilitator standpoint?
Yeah, good question. Because yeah, even though I have a deep relationship with Aya, I have no interest in serving the medicine. And I think for me, it's because ayahuasca has deep relationship with South America and with wisdom from that area. So I think, having that indigenous wisdom, that respect, the reciprocity, and all of that is important for anyone that's serving Aya. Like I would not feel comfortable sitting with someone who has not actually been to the Amazon to work with that medicine, or has not sat with it in that capacity. And with mushrooms, it's different because mushrooms, they grow everywhere, and they're a lot more accessible, and there's no specific area of the world that they come from. And a lot of different cultures have worked with mushrooms, but with ayahuasca, I think has ties to South America that I think also has just a level of respect of those who have really learned and sat with that medicine, and having that same integrity feels different than someone like myself who works with mushrooms. And I don't necessarily have to have gone to the Amazon or sat in that capacity, but I have my own deep connection with mushrooms, which feels to be more in alignment.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Ayahuasca just seems to be a bit more location. It's tied to a certain location, and when it's out of there, it almost kind of loses its power in a way. But going back to your first ayahuasca experience or first ayahuasca experiences, when you said it was pretty difficult, it was still very life changing, but pretty difficult. Now, as an experienced facilitator, and obviously having attended many ayahuasca ceremonies and working with mushrooms, what would have you done differently? Like, what would you tell those facilitators now? Like, what should they do to not to help you not have like an experience that is so, let's say, confusing?
I think preparation and having practices that are going to allow you to ground. Like, I didn't have any practices before, or any spaces as well. Like, community is medicine. Having a safe community where you can process or integrate, or working with someone. For me, it was therapy. So after a couple ceremonies, I finally got to therapy, and that's when things started changing. But I had no support. I thought that this was going to do all the work for me, and I actually was bypassing a lot of the actual integration work. So having the awareness of what integration is, knowing that the ceremony begins after the ceremony ends, for as far as like integrating and being able to really make space to process all of the intelligence of grandmother and be able to sit with it. So that does take time, and I don't think I didn't have that education or knowledge to do that. So really having practices that are going to support you, having time with yourself, connection with yourself, so that you can integrate and really be able to weave in the magic of the medicine into your day-to-day life.
I love this phrase that you use, spiritual bypassing. We all met people that, have done 10, 20, 50 ceremonies, but never changed because they never did the work. Talk to us a little bit about this spiritual bypassing, how it looks like, how can people prevent it from happening to themselves?
Yeah, good question, because that is what was happening to me. I didn't realize that. I had to go to a couple ceremonies to figure out what was going on. But for me, I thought that I was healed after my first ayahuasca ceremony. I was like, oh, okay, like I'm good. I don't need to do any work. And, me healing was going to ceremony. Well, it was healing to be in ceremony. That was not me doing the work. And I didn't want to look at everything that was under there, but I went to like love and light. I was like, oh, everything is good. I'm great. I feel amazing. Like not realizing that there's a lot of shit under there. So for me, it was like really being able to accept my own shadows, my own trauma, my own parts of me that I reject. Once I was able to really look at that and be like, actually, everything is not okay. There's a lot here, and I can't just skip it and be like, oh, okay, I'm healed and I'm good. And thinking that me going to the next ceremony was going to be able to get back to that place, because that's what was going on. I went to ceremony. I thought I was great, and then the magic wore off, the afterglow wore off, and the weed started to grow back really fast, and I was back in my same bullshit. Excuse the language, and then I would go back to ceremony, and I would feel great again, and then same thing would happen. So then I was like, something's not happening, like something's going on, and that's when I had another ceremony when the grandmother told me, "Hey, we keep telling you the same thing over and over again," and she's like, "I don't want to see you in ceremony again until you go do the work." And then it was a very challenging experience. It was what I perceived to be like an ego dissolution experience, where I thought I was dying. And I was resisting, and I did not want to let go. And then I finally did, and I came back. And that's when she was like, okay, you're going to get another chance. Do the work. And to me, that meant starting therapy, practicing yoga, meditation, journaling. And I was not in ceremony for a while. And then that's when I saw the healing started to happen. I saw really going inward and looking at who I am, where I come from, and all the things that made me who I am. And that really was when I started shifting energetically inside and out. And people could, after a while, they were able to tell that. And I could tell that. And it felt very different. So really, it was actually committing to my own healing and being able to look inside and be like, kind of take notice of what is really here and what's really there. What are my triggers? What are my reactions? Why do I behave in this way? And it was kind of like having to undo, like kind of be really curious and compassionate for who I was and where I was going.
It's very interesting because I think your experience is very similar to mine, because in the beginning, when I really started working with ayahuasca regularly, my goal was to heal my depression. And what you call an afterglow, it would take away my pain and my depression for 2 to 4 weeks at a time. And meanwhile, in those periods of time, I was able to actually like do stuff. You can call it work, but I think my main reason for my depression was lack of direction in life. So in that period of time, I would find myself taking courses, learning stuff, and sort of progressing. Till eventually, in one of the ceremonies, he kind of showed me like, here's your purpose. And since then, so in a way, for me, I did the work, but in a way, for me, ayahuasca kind of gave it to me. And even though it took more than a year for that intention to become a reality, because I've been asking, what am I here for? What am I here for? And then it finally told me, which just happened to be was was ayahuasca. Paradoxically so, that's what led me into starting my own retreat. But it is interesting that you also describe this experience where you have ayahuasca tell you like, why don't you do the homework? I've had one similar, and it felt like it was like, why are you back so soon? It felt angry. It felt I felt like I did something wrong, and then I had a terrible trip. And it's like, oh, you wanna disrespect me? I'm gonna show you. So it is interesting how ayahuasca in a way is self-governing, where I think it would be really hard to abuse it. And yeah, the two steps forward, one step back. You go, you get this afterglow, and you feel like your life is forever amazing. And then you kind of go back a little bit, and you need to do self-work and maybe go back into the ceremony and go a little bit further. But then in my experience, like years later, you realize, wow, your life has really changed. But it's really hard to tie it to one event. But there's a lot of people, they come to the ceremony and they're like, yeah, give me that magic pill so I can forever be good, never need to do anything about it. And yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't work. So you basically went from just this approach of like, there's a lot of time when people first work with ayahuasca, they kind of become like, oh, ayahuasca is everything and it's going to fix everything for me. And then over time, as you kind of educate yourself, you approach more of a holistic approach and you adopt more of a holistic approach and start combining different practices. So what is that perfect formula for you at the moment in both ayahuasca work, mushroom work, yoga, meditation? What other modalities that you use, and what is the formula? What do you think works best?
Yeah, and that's, it's different for everyone. But honestly, for me, the one thing that has been my greatest integration tool has been ongoing therapy. And I've been doing it for about 5 or 6 years. That's been like the biggest thing that I've been committed to. And then also, being in nature. I just moved to the mountains. So really, reconnecting with Pachamama, being connected to the earth, and being able to make space for that. Because I think before I was so disconnected from all of it. So nature is my biggest also teacher, my biggest guide. So being able to reconnect with that movement as well, being able to move my body, being able to, even if I don't feel great, going for a walk also helps me support and like integrate. Yoga is also one of the things that I'm getting back into, but has been really helpful, because before I used to struggle with a lot of anxiety, and with yoga, learning how my body can slow down with the breath, knowing how I can move energy, and that to me has been really grounding for me. I also work with Hape as well. So I love working with Hape. That's there. It's been a great kind of part of my practice to help me ground, to connect, to clear energy. I would say those are some of my things that I do currently for myself. Oh, and also I'll add community's medicine too. I realize that we don't have to do this by ourselves, and we shouldn't. So I'm very intentional about those that I do trust and I do let in, and also be vulnerable and then connect with others that are on this path too.
So basically paying more attention to your body and doing things that bring you back to your body, and just being conscious. I think you talk about it, about how to live in your heart and not in your head, and kind of introspecting. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So like I was saying about anxiety, like I used to live from my head, and that to me felt like a prisoner, where I was always thinking about what the next person's going to say about me, what they're doing, and all of that. So it was really just like not being able to be in the present moment, because I was always like trying to figure things out or trying to work things out in my mind, that I realized I wasn't being present. So working with medicine has allowed me to really go down a couple inches and live more from my heart space. And I really tune into that. Like, how do I feel around certain people? How does this feel in alignment with what my values are? Does it feel like I'm living with integrity, or being at a place with, that brings me joy? And a lot of it has been like being able to connect with my inner child. And that to me, like being able to live in that space, live from the heart, live like my inner child has allowed me to live a lot more compassionate, a lot more fulfilling life than had I been living in my head where I was. And now I see that with a lot of my clients that I work with, of how a lot of us do operate from our headspace, and how, our mind can tell us things and we are not our thoughts. But a lot of us don't know that because we're so programmed, or that's what we know how to be. And so being able to work with medicine allows us to tap into that a little bit more.
So when you say connecting to your inner child, a lot of people will be like, what is he talking about? How does it look practically? Where does it come from? Does it come through medicine, or maybe it's some form of special meditation that you do? So for somebody who is listening and they're wondering what does it mean, can you give some practical advice?
Yeah. So for me, inner child work is really, being able to connect with the little version of us, the younger version of us. A lot of times that's also where the trauma is too. So it could be, for me, when I started really focusing on this path, looking at certain parts of my life from my childhood that were, traumatic, and being able to really sit with those parts of me, being able to integrate it, being able to bring compassion, and let my inner child know, my little me, that those things that happened to him were not his fault, and there's nothing wrong with him. And, even apologize to, I'm sorry that had to happen to you. I'm sorry that the adults in your life didn't have the capacity to really show you the love that you deserve, and being able to tell him that. And that to me was really healing in a way, because I needed to hear that. And I still need to hear that. My inner child still has to hear that I'm here for him, that I love him, that he's there. And I feel like when I can tap into my inner child, I tap into creativity. I tap into presence, playfulness, and be able to live again from the heart, where we can see things more all just like children can. We can get back into that childlike state as adults as well. We still have that inner child. Like, if you put Legos up, I'm going to play with them and I'm going to have fun and it's going to be amazing. And I'm just going to forget about the world. That's what for me has been like reconnecting to parts of myself, like the inner artist that I didn't, as an adult, I wasn't doing things for play or creativity, because I was just like very like, okay, I'm an adult, now I got to act like an adult. And realizing that that's when I felt more disconnected. Once I started to bring more playfulness into my life and fun, that's when I start really living a life that feels more joyful for me.
Yeah, play is very important, and we need more of that. I'm a big fan of inner child work. What we do at Lawara, actually, before the ceremony, we give people breath work and meditation to put them in the right mental state. And one of the meditations we do is inner child meditation that focuses you on that. And I think it kind of primes lots of people's experiences to go and meet that inner child, and it's very profound. Another one of those is forgiveness. Another thing you talk about is you mentioned it earlier, shadow work. How does that look for you?
Yeah, and that's a good question. It's a lot of what I work with my clients too. I feel like shadow work is also connected with inner child work, because like I said, it's looking back at events or traumas and things that we might have. So for me, shadow work is really being able to connect with the parts of ourselves that we reject, the parts of ourselves that we might not want to look at. They're there. The parts that, society might deem as not worthy or whatever. There's like the shame, the guilt, the disappointment, and all of that we have within ourselves, but we might not be able to be connected with it. And then it will manifest in other ways. It might come out, as, behaviors or actions or thoughts or like different things. And that's what was happening in my life. I wasn't connected with my shadow, with my trauma, and it would manifest into depression, into anxiety, into drinking and trying to escape. And once I really sat down and I was working with a practitioner, and we were able to go back in my childhood and really see things that affected me, and I didn't know they affected me, and even generational trauma as well. And it was really difficult work. Like, it's not for the faint of heart at all to be able to come face to face with parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at. But the only way to heal it is to feel it. And I found that once I integrated my shadow, I became more, once I brought it to the light, if you will, I felt more complete. And that part of me is still there. There are parts in my life where I kind of forget about it, and then it comes back and creeps. And really, it's about doing a dance with our shadow self and knowing that that is a part of us too, and that part of us needs love as well.
Is that what you mean when you say parts work? In your bio, it mentioned parts work, or it's a different thing?
Yeah, it's parts work too. Yeah, exactly. Like being able to connect with the different parts of ourselves. Shadow is one of them.
Yeah, that's shadow work is something that I've heard about, and I even interviewed a guest specifically on it. But I think it's a hard concept to wrap your head around. It's kind of like you have this many different versions of you inside of you that you need to sort of make peace with. But as yeah, I'm very curious about that, maybe because my process never took me there, just as of now. So let's go back to the psychedelics. You work with mushrooms primarily, and I'm sure you're very experienced. What are your thoughts on macrodosing versus microdosing?
Yeah. I mean, most of my work now revolves around microdosing, and I've seen they both have their role in someone's journey. I personally, if I were to go back, I would have loved to start off with microdosing before I've gone to ceremony. And I work with a lot of clients that are new to all of this, and they ask me like, should I microdose before macrodose? And I always say yes, because it allows you to gently work with the medicine, mushrooms, and instinct. So it allows you to build a connection, to build trust, a relationship, and you can also do some inner work with it. Microdosing by itself is a very powerful tool and a very powerful modality to others. Like I've seen people that have had great experiences with anxiety, depression, getting off of pharmaceuticals with microdosing alone. It allows us to be more present with ourselves, more connected, and be more in tune, and also can regulate our nervous system. And it is also more accessible to people because we don't have to go to a ceremony, a retreat. We don't have to fly out anywhere. You can do it in your normal day-to-day. You're not really, having to go on a long journey. And I find that microdosing can help bring ceremony to our day-to-day lives. Intentional microdosing, of course. You have to do it with intention and be respectful and have, the right framework to work with it. And I do tell people like, well, microdosing is very effective. Also knowing its place as well. And it's good for the here and now and being more in the body and being less in the mind. But for the deep lifting, looking at trauma, looking at like the big, heavier, that's more suitable for a macrodose or a ceremony. And I do let people know that as well.
You mentioned pharmaceuticals. Do you have any experience, SSRIs versus microdosing of mushrooms? What's better, and how is there a comparison between two?
Yeah, I personally have not been on SSRIs, but I work with a lot of people who have. And I'll say this, SSRIs, they can and they do save lives. If someone is really struggling and they're in a really difficult situation, they can save their lives. But it's where then, we start becoming dependent on it. And that's what happens with SSRI. You can't just go off of it. You have to wean off of it. And sometimes when life happens, they up the dose. So, life is going to be happening, and then something, drastic might happen. And then the doctors will say, okay, we'll give you some more. And they give you more. And then years go by, and then you're just upping the dose every time something happens. So from what I work with my clients, they tell me like, it doesn't really solve anything. It just kind of puts a Band-Aid on things. And there's also side effects. They have, loss of interest. They don't have much motivation. They kind of numbs you in a way. They have problems with their libido. It starts affecting a lot. And I've even seen like with couples, then they're not being intimate, and it starts to like bring in other problems, and then they need more medications to help, mask the side effects. So then It's like, okay, we're just putting on medications and not really addressing the root cause of what's happening. And with microdosing, it can do that. It allows us to be more present with what is and allows us to be more introspective so that we can look at things in a different way. And also, we're not becoming dependent on the medicine. You can pause at any time. You can stop at any time. What SSRIs do is they inhibit our serotonin receptors. Psilocybin works with serotonin, so we're getting a natural serotonin boost. So people are feeling their baseline is being raised. They're able to feel more happier and be more connected and more present with working with microdosing. And also, we're not doing it every single day because of the tolerance buildup. With SSRIs, you are dependent on that every single day. You have to take it pretty much. And if you stop, there could be consequences. So anyone that's on it, they have to wean off of it with their pharmaceutical provider. So I just feel like working with the microdosing allows people to have more control, more agency, more space within themselves, as opposed to numbing it up.
It's very applicable for us because, as you know, to come to an ayahuasca retreat, people need to quit antidepressants, a few weeks in advance because there are adverse side effects. How would you go about helping somebody get off antidepressants and instead replace it with microdosing of mushrooms? Do you have any protocols, perhaps, or any tips for the people in that position?
That's actually really good question, because that is true. Like often with ayahuasca, people can't be on SSRIs, and that's why mushrooms are more accessible as well for people that are on them. And with anyone that comes to me that wants to start microdosing, I do let them know that this is going to be a process for them because they can't, with microdosing, it's a sub-perceptual dose. So we're not really feeling anything like going on a trip or anything. What with SSRIs is it's blunted. They might not feel it as much. So they might need a little bit higher dose. And then also I tell them, like, I'm not a medical professional, so they have to work with their provider to have a plan to wean off of it, but they could microdose while they're weaning off of it. And for most people that are weaning off of it, they have a more supported protocol, 5 days on, 2 days off with a little bit higher dose and I just talked to a client yesterday, actually, who she's been microdosing for a month now, and she is now weaning off her SSRI. She's done this before, but without microdosing, it was really hard for her. She said, I was not okay, and I had to go back on it. This time around, she's like, I don't feel a lot from the medicine, but I am able to wean off of it, and I'm not having the same reaction that I had before, and I do feel more at peace and more calm. I was like, okay, great. Then keep doing it. And she, so her plan is to eventually wean off of it completely, and is now using microdosing to help support her. Where before she did that, and she was not okay with it. Obviously, everyone's different, but I find that microdosing can support those that are getting off of it and can help wean off of it. And then with the awareness that they're not, because of the medicine that they're on, medication that they're on, they're not getting the full effects of the microdosing because they can't feel the full effects of it. So, and people know that. So knowing that, okay, it's going to be really trusting your own innate ability to heal, and also those medicines, and having patience as you're coming off of this pharmaceutical.
So speaking of feeling it and not feeling it, have you ever personally had a microdosing experience that was more than that, and you maybe had a bigger connection?
Yeah, when I first started microdosing, I was not weighing it out, and I would just like kind of eyeball it. And I remember this was back when I lived in LA and I worked in LA. I took a little, I would eyeball it. Okay, sure, I'll take this. And then I was in my office and I was like feeling something. I was like, oh crap. I was like, that's not a microdose. And then like, I remember like wanting to scream. And like, I was like, I had a meeting and I was like, I don't know how I can be doing this. And it actually made it like my anxiety worse. And I got really like triggered. And so that's when I realized like it is dangerous to microdose without precise weighing and having something that you know how much it is. Eyeballing it is not going to work. It needs to be a dosage that you know what it is. It has to be consistent. And yeah, so that happened. And I know now, like, not to do that anymore. So I was like, I have them weighed out. I know what it is. And I'm a lot more intentional about it.
I've had a similar experience once when I eyeballed my microdose. I don't regularly microdose, but there were periods of time when I experimented with it. And I just luckily saw I don't work in the office. I work here in the countryside. And I just laid in the grass for a bit, cried a bit, and made it feel much better. It's interesting. Mushrooms make me cry a lot. There's something about it, but not like sad crying, but just like crying and some kind of release. Let's talk about breath work. Let's say somebody is they took a microdose and now they're losing control and they're about to scream. Can breath work help them calm down and ease their anxiety?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the biggest tools that I utilize with my clients and also with my own self. Like, the breath it's the number one anchor. And I know even in ceremony, like sometimes when I'm sitting in ceremony and things start to get really intense, I'm usually not breathing. It's very shallow. Or then I start to really connect, slow down, bring it back, come back into my body. And I'm like, oh, okay, I got this. So same thing with microdosing. I do tell people that, like, if for whatever reason, if it feels too intense for you, start to do some breath, start to breathe, start to do some controlled breathing, start to slow down. And it's going to help you come back. It's going to help you kind of ground and center yourself. And also with breath work in particular, like, I also practitioner for breath work, I've seen breath work as a powerful modality where people can have a psychedelic experience on breath work as well. So it really just tells us, like, how the breath is a tool as well. It's its own medicine, and we don't have to get high on anything else. We can just use our own supply.
Mm-hmm. Any specific breath work for somebody to calm the anxiety in the ceremony? Any specific routine or technique?
Yeah, I think one that I've been practicing is box breathing. So it's like you do 4 counts of, like, inhale 4 counts, hold it for 4 counts, and then exhale, and kind of do like a box in that way. That one's really good. I like using that one for grounding, but in ceremony, I'm not going to remember all that. I just need to know to breathe. It's like, just tell myself, like, are you breathing? Are you, like, intentionally breathing? Taking 3 deep breaths can make all the difference.
And speaking of breath work and speaking of anxiety, you have suffered with social anxiety, right? How was your healing journey from that specifically?
Yeah, that was actually, that held me back the most in my life. And I realize now, like, my dad used to have it, so I think it's a generational thing. But before, I remember my first ayahuasca ceremony, I was more afraid of introducing myself and my name than drinking the cup. When they were, like, doing this, like, everyone's name, I was like, oh crap, I'm almost next. I almost had, like, a heart attack. I don't know what it was. I just had a lot of fear of being seen, fear of being able to speak my voice. So I did have a stutter as I grew up, and I would often trip over my words. I wasn't able to speak very clearly. And that to me was very debilitating, especially when I knew that I had a calling to be a leader or to be someone, who was speaking in the room. So for me, working with ayahuasca really helped me kind of see that clearly. And I remember there was one ceremony where she's like, okay, we're going to get rid of this social anxiety thing that you have. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah. And then I just felt an energy, and then I just started purging, and I started, like, purging away my fear, my doubt, my insecurity, and allowing it to be in the bucket. And I even, like, there was this part of me that was doubting. I'm like, is this, like, I don't know if this is going to work. It's like, oh, you still have some more fear in you. Okay, let's get it out. And it just, like, it was just incredible how, like, I was thinking it, and she was working with me to purge this out of myself. And it has been a process. Like, it wasn't like immediately after that ceremony I could speak in front of a crowd, but then I started putting myself in situations where I could, be able to speak, be able to talk to others, be able to project and really use my voice. And then I started seeing like, oh, actually, this is not that bad. So I started practicing being able to do it. And now like I can speak on this podcast. I can speak to people on social media. I host retreats and I'm the one that's kind of has to be able to speak with confidence and clearly. Otherwise, people are not going to feel safe. And so that really has been a big journey for me. And that's why I really empathize with people that have social anxiety, because I know how scary it is. And like I remember in college, my communications class was the worst class that I just did not want to do it. And before, when I was in college, I would cope my social anxiety with alcohol. And then when I graduated, I would still cope with alcohol. So I would have to go to events or things and have to drink to get liquid courage. And then that turned into an alcohol problem where I just felt like I needed to always do that to be able to function and be able to do things. And then that's kind of where ayahuasca came in and started really being able to see like where my social anxiety was coming from. And I was able to look back, and what happened was when I was young, I grew up as Spanish speaker, native Spanish speaker. And then I was, here in America. So a lot of times when kids have like two languages, they have ellipse. So I would kind of not say my S's correctly. And I remember there was a kid in elementary school who told me, like, he'd making fun of me. He was like, hey, why do you sound stupid? Like, why do you sound dumb? And from that moment, it just ingrained it into me that I sound stupid. And then so from then on, my biggest fear of social anxiety was I was afraid that everyone was thinking I sounded stupid. So it sounds silly, but it actually traumatized me, and I didn't realize it until afterwards. And then, doing this work, I'm like, actually, no, you are a smart intellectual being, and your voice is medicine, and being able to speak your truth is important. And that kind of allowed me to really work past that, and now being able to speak in front of others, which was again like really hard and like not something that I would wish on anyone, but yeah, that's kind of been my journey with social anxiety and speaking.
Thank you for sharing your journey. I think some people with social anxiety might find it very inspirational because, it's very important to be able to communicate and get your voice out there, because otherwise you wouldn't be here and nobody would hear you. It's such an important thing to have that outlet. And you're not the first person to say, they dread sharing more than they dread the ayahuasca itself, because we do word circles at our retreat. So before we even start drinking medicine, people share their stories, and a lot of people say exactly that. I would say 2 people per group on average would say, they dread the sharing part, and some are in a very debilitating way. They barely speak, and maybe they say one sentence or so. And for me, it's beautiful to observe how over the week, let's say if it's a 1-week retreat, 4 ceremonies, as they work with the medicine, they start opening up, and by the end of it, they're like, they're just like going for it, and it's hard to even imagine that they had social anxiety to begin with. So it's a very quick fix, in a way. Of course, afterwards it might come back, and there is certain comfort they create with the group. But I've seen that psychedelics can be extremely helpful. But talking about word circles and sharing. I believe it's a big part of the healing that comes from the group. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, and what do you think is the importance of the community in the work with plant medicines?
Yeah, I think for me, it was very healing to be able to sit in a community, to sit in a circle, to be able to be vulnerable, be able to share my voice, to hear others, to hear their experiences, and be able to connect. Like, there are people that ask me like that. Some people do like a private ceremony and they'd rather do that, but I prefer being in a group setting. It feels to me ancestral. It feels like this is what our ancestors used to do: sit in circle, sit in community, be able to process, to share, to integrate as a whole, because we're not meant to be doing this alone. And when we see the collective healing that happens in a ceremony, and we're able to speak to that, be able to hold and to witness and to be held and to be seen, there's a certain level of like magic that it's unexplainable, and I know you know what it means, but it to me, community is medicine, and I've healed. A lot of my healing has been from these retreats, from these circles, being able to connect with others. And even though, I may not talk to them now, they have been an integral part of my life, and I will always hold that.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people come to our retreat, and our groups are on average about 25 people. And some of them are like, yeah, I'm not sure, so many people. And people, they really avoid people. And by the end of the week, they say that the people is the best part, and the groups really bond. That's another thing I observe with plant medicines. There is some kind of magic that happens as we all take off our masks and start to vulnerably share. Plus, obviously, the magic of the plant medicines, and then all of a sudden, the bonding just starts to happen, and it's so quick that by the end of the week, there are people that it feels like they've been friends forever. And I like this phrase, the best way to make friends as an adult is to go to an ayahuasca retreat. What do you think about that? What's the process? What's the underlying process?
I love that. I've never heard that before, but I've sat in many different circles and groups. I love learning from different facilitators, obviously if they're aligned. And I've had different parts of my life where, I'll meet someone at a ceremony and I connect with them a lot more deeper than somebody I've known for a long time, or somebody that I can meet elsewhere, because in this space, we are authentic, we are real, we're vulnerable, we're raw. We see each other purge. That's like really vulnerable and raw. Like, when else can you feel like, letting go of your traumas in front of somebody else and not being like ashamed of it. And I think being able to have that connection with someone in ceremony is really special, because in ceremony, we are all energetically connected. We're all in that space. If somebody cries, we feel their pain. If somebody laughs, we feel that joy. And same way, so that's something that is a very special connection that I think you can only feel in that space. So it makes sense to be able to connect with someone very deeply. Now, friends that I've sat with in ceremony, I feel like they know a part of me that nobody else does, and vice versa. I know a part of them that people won't know.
I think in a way it's like soldiers going to war together. You've been through so much together, you rely on each other, and that creates that extra quick bonding. So, but it's beautiful to observe in our world, which is so disconnected and we're so lonely. It's just beautiful to see people connecting and forming friendships. And one of my dreams for the future of my of Lawara, the project, is to build a community. I like to say, you come for ayahuasca, you stay for the community. Have people just live here and work and be healthy and be productive and just be in the community and sit by the bonfire at night, kind of like in the good old days when we were still living in a tribal society.
Yeah, and I like that. I don't know, I was going to mention this, but I don't know if you can relate to this, but I feel like you said, you mentioned going to war, and when it gets intense in ceremony, and when I hear, I have friends that I drink with, and when I hear one of my friends purging, I'm like, yes, I'm like, hell yes, I'm like really happy for them. And then I'm like, wait, in the real world, when someone's throwing up, are we celebrating it? But here we know that they're healing, we know that they're letting go of things, and we're able to cheer them on. Same things like when I have a really good purge, my friends will be like, oh yeah, that was a good one. And it's funny.
Yeah, because you understand that they're not just vomiting, they're actually releasing, and you're happy for them. Yeah, that's another common one, that people really celebrate each other's processes. Well, Adrian, I think it was an interesting and entertaining episode. Before we wrap it up, is there any last recommendations or last words you want to tell to the audience, and also where can they find more about you?
Yeah, so to anyone listening to this, no matter where you're at on your plant medicine journey, whether you're just starting or you've been in ceremony, just a reminder that you are the medicine and it's always within you. So, always know that. And where you can find me is my Instagram is lozano.flows, or my website is lozanoflows.com.
You are the medicine, Adrian, and I'm gonna tag your Instagram to the show notes. And thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Sam.
As I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you like our podcast and would like to support us and psychedelic revolution at large, please follow us and leave a like whenever you're listening to this podcast. Nothing in this podcast is medical advice. It's intended for educational purposes only.
Con la vida, vida de la baila, cura con la guaira, limpia, limpia, taita, vibrando.